all sit round and get our accounts together of the day. We've actually just haven't discussed it. We're just going to give it as we remember it. Start off with Bob Wiskins, who's also going to mention one of the key people who ran the miners' collections during the strike was Paul McNee, and he can't be here tonight, but he's also sent his tribute. So I'll leave it to Bob to set the tone. There is also a song which follows, which was actually immortalises the whole event. Okay.
Thank you, Kevin. Just a couple of things to say about Bob Etheridge. I mean, I've got a number of things in common with Bob. My name is Bob, and his name's Bob. I worked in the motor trade, and he worked in the motor trade. But you know, a serious thing to say about Bob Etheridge. Bob Etheridge was a rare type of person. He was rare because he was one of the few people you come across in your life's journey along your rocky road of life. He was a real working class intellectual. He was one of these people who hung on to ideas and principles against all the crap that's piled down on people. That's not easy. And the other thing that I'd like to say, I mean, I'm proud to have been a fellow traveller on the road occasionally with Bob, and one of the occasions certainly was during the motor trade show on the Brink, and being with him and performing against, you know, a show which was trying to tell a story about the resistance that was happening in the motor industry at the time. But Bob was also a little bit unique in other ways because, you know, when he was campaigning, when he was struggling, and when he was sort of supporting people in struggle in 1984 and before that, he was about the age I am now, or a little older, and I'm thinking, I get on with the nights when I finish work and I want to go to sleep. And there was Bob. There was Bob certainly coming out and rehearsing to sort of be in the banner shows, to educate and organise. But there he was also every Saturday morning during the miners' strike of 1984 for about 7 months, busking, helping to raise money and support and agitate the cause for the miners during that period. And I think that, you know, that in itself is I realise how difficult it must have been for a person that age, you know, to have actually done that. And that shows the strength of character of Bob Etheridge to be able to still want to struggle and still want to agitate, educate and organise and still be prepared to do something, and that's brilliant. On the question of the busking that took place, you know, there was one of the things that happened during that momentous strike and that struggle. There was hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who were contributing, supporting what was an important struggle that was going on. And what was happening in Birmingham was just a pebble on the beach. But it was more than a pebble on the beach. It was a little microscope. I can't say the word, but of people actually coming together and trying to sort of support people in struggle at that time. But what we faced when we busked every Saturday, and it started with Dave Rogers. I remember him sort of singing on his own in the town, and he grew from there. It became a sort of symbol of the kind of the weight of the state that was attacking people that were trying to support the miners. Every week, the police used to dream of stories, dream of ways of stopping us achieving our objective. They wanted to stop us singing about the miners. They wanted to stop us propagating what they wanted, their struggle. They wanted to stop us raising money because they wanted wanted the miners to be defeated. And during that course of that struggle, we got to know a particular Chief Inspector Postins, who became obsessed. But it wasn't that Chief Inspector Postins was obsessed. He represented the kind of weight of attack that was happening. And Chief Inspector Postins used to stand in the dark shadows of Chelsea Girl as we were singing, I'd rather be a cowpat than a cop. You know, things like that. And he used to stand there, he looked like Colonel Green out of Quatermass in the Pit. But every week we had to devise new ways of overcoming the kind of tactics that police would use. And on this particular day, in fact, Kevin, you're to blame for this, wherever you are, along with me, because what we decided to stop the police stopping us singing and raising money, that if we got approached by the police, what we would do, me and Kevin were given the job that we'd go and interview them and get them out of the way while everybody else sang. And this particular day, a couple of coppers come down the street, and it must have been part of the strategy to stop them today. And we went over and we had a tape recorder, and he says, right, what's your problem? And Kevin and I began to interrogate these police, and basically it just completely threw their head. They didn't know what was going on, so they got in touch with their Chief Inspector Postins, and we were singing there, and all of a sudden, seriously, up Union Passageway, there was a entourage led by this Chief Inspector Postins coming down this passageway to confront the situation. And he come across all the people that were singing and busking and raising for the miners, and he says, who's got the tape recorder? Who's got the tape recorder? He was absolutely off his trolley. He really, really was. And with that, people started to engage with him. He did a brilliant job, because all the people around, the public, all started gathering. The crowd swelled and swelled and swelled. And basically, this guy was the best thing since sliced bread, because he was bringing an attention to what was happening with the miners' strike, and he didn't have any arguments. And there was Bob. I remember it, because Bob had been there shaking his tin and singing away, and then he was there and he was listening to the arguments and what have you. And it turned out to be a county councillor at the time, put some money in his tin, and with that, this Chief Inspector Postins noticed it at the corner of his eye, and he absolutely flipped his lid. It absolutely set him on the top. He says, arrest that man! And poor Bob was there with his tin, and suddenly they grab him, but they frog marched him, and his hands up his back as though he was some kind of serious criminal. And as they literally chased him towards the van. But what he didn't want them to get their hands on his money. So he threw, literally, they had his hands like that, but he threw the collection tin towards us so we could get the money. And they literally, very, very roughly, manhandled him into that van and arrested him, and it was absolutely atrocious. But Bob basically symbolised the kind of resistance that was going on. For us, he was a hero. He was a hero that day, because he took the brunt. He took the brunt, and ultimately he was the one that they picked on. He was the one that they victimised. And you know, the field of struggle throughout the years is littered with people who get victimised. He was victimised, and he took the hit that day, and was subjected to being arrested and all the rest, and all the things that followed. But the song that we're going to sing today, just to quickly say that I was given a tribute to read from Paul McNee. Paul McNee was the leader of the Trades Council at the time, who subsequently became General Secretary of NATFA Union. And Paul McNee very warmly remembers his memories with Bob, going back well before the incident of the miners' strike and the time that he used to go to the Greycock Folk Club. So I've tried to circumvent what he would have said, but he's here in spirit himself, and he warmly remembers the contribution that Bob made. But this song that's going to be sung now really seriously tells the story in a very, very funny way, but it's really true. It's really true. So, hey, I think I've said too much. No, into the story.
Just before we start, we've got a few more accounts, because that's one particular point of view. My memory's going, there's some of that, there's new things I hadn't remembered from that point. I'd like to call on a younger member who I didn't realise was there at the day, Catherine, who was, well, I'll leave it over to you. Catherine was there as a young person, and she'll give her account from her point of view of the day's event.
Hiya. I was quite a bit younger than these guys. I have the questionable honour of having grown up with this community of people, which meant that at the age of 8 years old, instead of watching telly or being out on my bike on a Saturday morning, I was with these lot busking for the miners. And what they used to do is they used to put the kids with the buckets, so that people would say, oh, they're cute, and give more money for the miners. And that was something that we accepted because that was the indoctrination we received in those days. But no...
Counter conditioning.
But no, from what I remember of the day, I just remember, I mean, Bob was one of the family. You know, when you grow up in a political network, then the people in that network become your family, and these people around me are my family, and Bob was one of my family, really, and will always have a special place in my heart as a result of that, and was a hero. I forgive him for the fact that he made my mum buy a pea green Skoda, which drove like a tank and blew up all over the place and caused us shame when we went to school, but no. Bob was a fantastic bloke, and I think when it's one thing to lose a friend, but to lose a comrade is another thing. So I think it's really important that we're remembering Bob tonight.
Just a little bit more. There was a little bit of an event happened after I remember. I think Bob was on my Bob Whiskins was on my right hand side, and I think Postins was coming across to us. And by and large, we were sort of blagging and saying we were just having a chat with him, and we were all winding each other. And I think he just had enough. And I think the big mistake that was happening was suddenly he was so wound up that suddenly someone leaped over us all. Put some money, I think it was a £5 into Bob's tin, and as it worked out, there happened to be I believe it was a county councillor, and that's the point when Postins just lost himself and went for it. There was a slight, after he'd been dragged off, we all then decided, a little group of us decided to rush down to Steelhouse Lane, which was just round the corner, and we went tearing round. And I think Postins realised he'd made a mistake because he shouldn't have really lost his cool, and we went running in through to Steelhouse Lane, demanding what have they done with Bob Whiskins, and Postins came out looking rather shaken and saying, who do you want to see? And we were saying, well, we've come for the person, how are you treating him? He says, and he was saying, well, we haven't been brutalising him or anything. And then he said, what's the name of the person you're after? And we said, it's Bob Etheridge, and his face went pale, and he suddenly said, he isn't any relationship to Dick Etheridge, is he? And apparently Dick Etheridge is a relation to Bob, wasn't he? Cousin. And apparently Dick was a trade union activist, and obviously Postins had dealing with the Etheridge family more than Bob, and his face went white. And so that was that sort of memory for the day. And I believe that some years later that Bob went through the courts and actually was vindicated, I believe. Is that right? It was settled out of court. So his good name was cleared in one form or another. But out of court. Yes, and I'd like to... Fran, who was going to say a few things as well. Thank you.
Yes, because we heard the stories from Bob after this, and it's quite obvious that he tortured and tormented the police. I'm Frances Rifkin. I directed a lot of the shows around that period for about 10 years. And I was on these picket lines, these busking for the miners. And Bob got into that cop shop and tormented them with long discourses, discussions, comments, remarks, until I think they could hardly live with themselves at all, asking questions. He met somebody, who'd been a local postman round where he lived. Oh yes, and the whole reminiscing set in. And Bob's tale of what he did in the police station was absolutely hilarious, and only Bob would have had the nerve to get away with it under those conditions, because the police were completely hysterical. And I was going to say, I wasn't there that week because I was off on some mission in the miners' strike, the banner. But the week before we'd been there, and the police were building up the pressure, and they were harassing us and surrounding us. And I remember at one point a cop walked up to me, so I held my tape recorder up, and he said, PC 34, so-and-so police station, blah, 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 and started talking and automatically into the tape recorder and Paul took a photograph, which is in his book, of me giggling and recording this copper. So it probably fueled Postins' horror at the notion that we might be recording the police. But that week, they started harassing us, and a crowd developed and started saying, well, why won't you leave them alone, and what's the problem? And this crowd got bigger and bigger. I don't know if anybody else remembers this. And the police got very nervous, didn't they? I mean, they really got worried because the crowds on the streets were interrogating them and they went away. And so the next week, Postins had this go. And it was a completely epic moment, wasn't it? Has anybody else got anything to say?
might do a Bob Etheridge and go prompt. Yeah, okay. It was early on a Saturday in the summer of '84. I was standing with me comrades outside Marks and Sparks' store, collecting for the miners in a style uncompromising, with 3 chords on the old guitar and with voices harmonising. We're collecting for the miners. We're collecting for the miners and their family. Well, our songs of solidarity we belted out like thunder. You could even hear the melody right down by the rotunda. £500 we raised that day, and Christ we slaved to earn it, with a weather eye for the local fuzz, 'cause we hadn't got a permit. Won't you go home, McGregor? Won't you go home? You've been around too long. Well, next week in Union Passageway, the sight was most entrancing. Is that the right verse?
No, we was back in force.
We was back in force next Saturday, and the cash was a-rolling in. When up steps this big fat rozzer with the brains of a refuse bin. He steps right up to Kevin Hayes, a musician of perfection. And he says, I am arresting you for illegal street collection. Well, Hazy wasn't having it, and he shows his indignation. What about the Oxfam man and animal liberation? Now this didn't seem to please the cop, who was about to make a booking. So he all takes off at double speed before we all get took in. Oh, I'd rather be a cowpat than a cop. Oh, I'd rather be a cowpat than a cop. Well, next week in Union Passageway, the sight was most entrancing, 'cause a Morris team with bells and flowers, it's all true, around the place was a prancing. Go on, give me a line, for God's sake, I've forgotten it. When I sees this chief inspector guy with an arse like a cold-board truck, sir, postings, and he's rushing towards them Morris men who start to run off like fucks, sir. But he wasn't after Morris men, of that there was no disguising. As he tripped over an electric violinist who just started improvising. By the time he disentangled himself, this cop was a really groovy. Later. So he opens up with a good strong blast of We Shall Not Be Moving. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. What's next? Next thing I knew, the place was full, the transit vans and coppers. It was getting very clear to us, they really meant to stop us. Now Chief Inspector Postins didn't want no polemicizing, so Robert Whiskins has a go, trying hard not to antagonise him. What about the crime wave? That was one at the time. What about the crime wave? He says, I will arrest you if you block my passageway. To which replies Brother Whiskins, what about the 2 transit vans, the pavement eyes, and the section of the Welsh National Opera, who had just begun to play? True. At this point, Postins flips his lid, and the crowd begins to cheer up, and they arrested Robert Etheridge, who is now a working class hero. So a victory was won that day. 9:30 next Saturday. The cash was a-rolling in. It was back in force again. Once more to meet the boot boys from the Nick in Steelhouse Lane. Unless you have a permit, that will meet our satisfaction. Then we will arrest you for illegal street collection. Well, up steps Paul Magny, and he sussed out all the legalities. He says, according to the law, there are no irregularities. He says, we could agree with you, collecting breaks the bylaws. But we're not street collecting, we're only busking for the minors. It's a good line, eh? We're busking for the minors. Oh, we're busking for the minors and their families. So, this means we've stopped going to. So a victory. So it was clear to see the cops had got their wifers twisted. Cause busking now is legal, cause the council has insisted that lots of music on the streets brings a lolly to the city. When the copper comprehends the fact, his mood was really shitty. Despite the old Bill's antics, we shall not be moved. Despite the old Bill's antics, we shall not be moved. So a victory was won that day. Now Union passing by, and the old Bill's got the message. We are here to stay. So outside Marks and Sparks' store each Saturday, you'll find us shaking our collecting tins and busking the miners.
That was wonderful. I think we're now going for the finale, so if we get Mark's band up.